All right, so I'm going to go over your 2, 1, 2, 2 practice homework stuff. So if we look at this first one, right, we're given in 23, we'll do 23 and 24. We're given the line segment. They want us to find the midpoint and the distance. So what's the first thing I have to do if I have a picture? What do I have to figure out first? The points. Good. So in number 23, what are the 2 points that I'm looking at? -3, positive what? 3. Okay. And then what's the other point? 5, -3. Do you guys agree with that? Okay. So now to find the distance, we're going to use the distance formula. And to find midpoint, we're going to use the midpoint formula. Let's do midpoint first. In order to find the midpoint, what do I do to my x's?
You subtract them.
No, we're going to add. So it's 5 plus -3 divided by 2. And then my y's are what? 3 plus -3 divided by 2. So guys, 5 plus -3 is 2. And 2 divided by 2 is 1. 3 plus -3 is 0, and 0 divided by 2 is 0. So the midpoint for number 23 is 1, 0. So if I went onto my line and I went over 1, and up and down 0, and I put my point, does that point look like it's in the middle of that line segment? Yes. So that's a way you can check yourself. Now, if we're going to do the distance formula, like I said before, get your distance formula set up. D equals, it's a big square root. And then underneath our square root, we have 2 parentheses, correct? What goes in the middle of each parenthesis? What sign? Minus, good. What goes in the middle of those 2 parentheses? Good. Plus, and then what goes on the outside of each parenthesis? Squared. Good job. So now all we do is we keep our x's together, keep our y's together. Does it matter if I say -3 minus 5 or 5 minus -3? No, because we're going to square the result. So I'm just going to say -3 and 5. Those are my x's. And then over here I'm going to say 3 and -3 for my y's. Everybody with me? So now if we simplify, what is -3 minus 5? -8. I'm going to square it. Plus, what's 3 plus 3? So 6 squared. What's -8 squared? 64. Plus, what's 6 squared? 36. What is 36 and 64? What is it? 100. Good. And then what is the square root of 100? So the distance is 10. How come it's not plus or minus 10? Okay, the square root was already there. But what's another reason? It is a perfect square. But what do we know about distance? It can't be negative. It's always going to be positive. Good. So let's look at, you guys want to do, what are one of these? 22, 23, 24. 24? Okay. What are the points that we have for 24? What are my 2 points I'm looking at? -2 for 24. -2 what? -2, -3. And then 4, -1. Okay, so let's find the midpoint first. How do you find the midpoint again? You add what? X, divide by 2. Then add what? Divide by, okay. So -2 plus 4 is 2. And 2 divided by 2 is, good. -3 plus -1. -4 divided by 2. So -4 divided by 2 is? -2. So my midpoint is at 1, -2. So let's go on this line. Go over 1, down 2. Does it look like that is the middle of that line? So then you did it right. And then we're going to do our distance. Again, set your distance up first. I have my 2 parentheses. What goes in between each parenthesis? What goes in between? Plus sign. Inside each parenthesis is a subtraction, and I square both parentheses. So just take your x's. What are my x values? negative 2 and 4. What are my y values? Negative 3 and negative 1. Now we just simplify. What is negative 2 minus 4? Negative 6, so squared, plus, what's negative 3 minus the negative 1? Good, negative 2 squared. What's negative 6 squared? 36 plus what? So I'm left with the square root of 40. I have to make sure that I don't have any perfect squares in there. Can I break down the square root of 40? Yes, this would break down into 4 times 10, right? So my distance is 2 root 10. Good. Is that good? You guys all right? Okay, so how can I? All right, so now let's do some of these. All right, let's do 2 of these. Pick 2. 28 and which one? 28, 32. Okay. Now, how are these two different than the first two that we did? There's no what? There's no graph. There's no picture. If you want to draw one, you could, but you don't have to. Just take the points. On 28, I have negative 1, negative 1, and then 9, 9. Yes? Okay, so let's find the midpoint first. How do you find the midpoint? Okay, negative 1 plus 9 divided by 2, and negative 1 plus 9 divided by 2. What is negative 1 plus 9? 8, and 8 divided by 2 is? So your midpoint is at 4 comma, what? Yep, there's your middle. And then if I'm going to find my distance, what are my x's? Negative 1 and 9. What are my y's? Negative 1 and 9. So I have, what's negative 1 minus 9? Negative 10 squared plus what? Negative 10 squared. So I have 100 plus 100, right? Yes? So I'm left with the square root of 200. That's my distance. Can I break that down? Yes. What can I break down 200 into? 102. So if I break this down into 100 times 2, square root of 100 is 10. Root 2 is my distance. Questions? The only thing that's really tough about this, guys, is you really have to pay attention to your signs. Just make sure that you don't have any sign errors. Let's look at 32. Is that one you said, Matt? Yeah. What are the points for 32? Say it again. Guys, give me somebody. 32. What are the points? 213 and 7 what? 1. Okay. So, midpoint. Add 2 plus 7 divided by 2, right? 13 plus 1 divided by 2. So, 2 and 7 is 9, and 9 over 2. Can we simplify that pretty? So just leave it. If you want to, you can. But you don't have to. What's 13 plus 1? And 14 divided by 2 is? So there's your midpoint. You can leave it just like that, guys. If you want to put it into a mixed number or a decimal, you can, but I would not. Don't leave any room for silly mistakes, so just leave it like that. Now let's do our distance. Got it all set up? What are my x's? So 2 minus 7, and what are my y's? 13 and 1. Again, does it matter what order I put them in? No, just as long as you keep x's together and keep y's together. So 2 minus 7, that's negative 5 squared, plus 14 squared, right? So, thank you. Yep, you're right. So 25 plus 144 is 169. Does everybody know what the square root of 169 is? It is 13. So your distance is 13. Anybody else? We okay? Pretty straightforward, guys. Distance and midpoint. The last thing, you will have a problem that looks like this that says plot the points. I'll give you a graph to plot your points. And it'll say to prove that the quadrilateral is a quadrilateral, maybe by bisecting segments or something like that. If it says to find the area, how do you find the area of something? Base times height, length times width. So if you have to find the distance of one side, the distance of another side, multiply it together, something like that. Okay? All right, going on to here. We did this yesterday. We're going to talk about X and Y intercepts. How do you find them? We're going to talk about stuff with circles. So let's look. I want to do, we're going to do 26. We'll do 20. 16. How's that sound? Is that a variety? All right, let's look at 16. 16 says x plus y equals 3. Now, there's a couple ways you can write intercepts. I'd like you to write them as an ordered pair, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world. But if I plug in 0 for x, what am I finding? The y-intercept. So this y-intercept is 3. I would write that as I plugged in 0 for x, and I got 3 as my answer. That is how I would like you to write it, as an ordered pair. If I come over here and I say x plus 0 equals 3, what am I finding? I'm finding the x, right? So x equals 3, so I would write that as 3 comma 0. Somebody asked me yesterday, can I just write it as 3, 3? Guys, is 0, 3 and 3, 0 the same thing as 3 comma 3? No. No. Intercepts will have a 0 with them. If you're finding the x-intercept, your y is 0. If you're finding the y-intercept, your x is 0. But you can't combine those two things, so make sure you guys pay attention to that. If we look at number 20, 20 is 8y equals x cubed, correct? Okay, so if I plug in 0, you just write it. 8 times 0 equals x cubed. What did I plug in for 0? I'm sorry, what am I solving for here? X, all right? I'm solving for the x-intercept. So this is going to be 0 equals x cubed. Now what? Take the cube root. What is the cube root of 0? So how would I write this point? 0 comma 0. Good. I plugged in 0, I got out 0. So over here, I'm going to say 8y, right, equals 0 cubed. So 8y equals 0. What do? Divide both sides by 8, so I get y equals 0. Well, how do I write that as a point? 0, 0. That's okay. You can get the intercept to be the same. That's all right. But that's how you guys would show me your work. You can leave it as x equals 0 or y equals 0, or you can write it as a pair. I'd like you to write it as a point, but if you don't, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, 26 is x squared plus y squared equals 9. Okay. So I'm going to plug in 0 for x plus y squared equals 9. Well, what's 0 squared? So y squared equals 9. Now what? Take the square root. So y equals what? Plus or minus 3. I would write that as an ordered pair as 0 comma positive 3, 0 comma negative 3. Now if I solve for the other intercept, I'm going to say x squared plus 0 squared equals 9. So x squared equals 9. Now what? Square root. So x equals what? Plus or minus 3. Guys, this point would be written how? 3 comma 0 and negative 3 comma 0. All four of those points are different. 0, 3 is to the right of the origin. 0, negative 3 is to the left. 3, 0 is above the origin. Negative 3, 0 is below. Do you guys see how those are four different points? Okay, just make sure you guys are aware of that. All right, up here, if it says to find the x and y intercept, you guys are going to say, we didn't do one like this. If I find the X and Y intercepts, guys, we plug in 0, right? So if I say y equals, and I say 0 squared minus 5 times 0 plus 6. Well, what's 0 squared? What's negative 5 times 0? So y equals 6. What is your y-intercept for this graph? At 0 what? Good. That's your y-intercept. Well, how do you find the x-intercept? What do you plug in for y? 0. So guys, watch. If I plug in 0, I have x squared minus 5x plus 6. Does this look like a problem that we've seen before? Yeah. How do you solve this? You factor it. Good. What are the... I told you, factoring is never going away. What are the factors of 6, positive, that multiply to give me positive 6, but add together to give me negative 5? Negative 2, negative 3. Good. So negative 2, negative 3. So that means I have intercepts at x equals what? Positive 3, and x equals positive 2. So I would write that as 2, 0, 3, 0. But it's just a quadratic. It's not anything. As soon as you plugged in 0, you should be like, oh, we've done this a million times. You got intercepts here and here. All right, now let's talk about circles. In 50, 52, 54, they say find the center and the radius. Don't worry about sketching it. Find the center and the radius. You guys can tell me that just by looking at your graph. What is the center of 50? What is it? 0, 0. How did you get that? Because there's no number being added or subtracted with x and y. And then what is my radius? The square root of what? 5. Do we know what that is? No, so just leave it. All right, 52. I'm going to find the center. What is the center for 52? What is being added or subtracted to x? 0. And then what is being added or subtracted to y? So when I pull it out of the equation, what do I do to the sign? I flip it. So the center is at 0, 2. And what's my radius?
2.
Yep. You just take the square root. So what's the center, guys, for 54? Negative 1, negative 2. Good. And what's my radius? Perfect. Does everyone understand where we got the center from? Yeah. Switch the sign. Just pull it out. Okay? All right, a couple more, then we're done. 6. Take square root of 36. So let's do 56. We'll do 56 over here. 56. They tell me that the center is at negative 1, negative 4, and the radius is 8, correct? All right, what are the two things you need in order to write the equation of a circle? Radius and the center. Do I have both those things? Yeah. All right, so then this is easy. We got to remember what our formula is. Kind of looks like what formula? Kind of looks like the distance formula. So set it up that same way. What goes in that first parenthesis? X, right? Well, let's just set it up. Let's just set it up so you don't even have to think. So X goes in the first parenthesis. What goes in the second one? Y. What goes in the middle of those two parentheses? A plus sign. What do I put in the corner of each parenthesis? A squared. Right? So now I have everything I need. Now I just plug in my center. In the formula, it's minus in the middle. So when I take this negative 1 and I put it right here, what does that become? Good. So it's x plus 1 squared. Plus, I'm going to take this negative 4, I'm going to put it right here, so this becomes y plus 4 squared. And then 8 squared, do not tell me it's 16. 64. That'll be a common mistake you guys make. You'll just not even think, and you'll tell me, oh, it's 16. Square means you multiply it by itself. Yes, ma'am. All right, 58. 58 gives us a little less detail. 58 tells us that the center is at negative 1, 5. And there's a point that the circle that's on the circle that's at negative 4, negative 6. So what they're telling me is the center's right here, and there's a point over here. So what do I need to find? The radius. I can already get my formula kind of set up. I can get the beginning part set up, right? I can say x what? Plus 1 squared plus what? Y minus 5 squared. Fantastic. Where'd you get that from? But, yep, we already had the center, so we can already put that in. So now all we have to find is the radius. What formula do I use to find the radius? The distance. We got to find the distance, how far it is from one side to the other. So what are your x values? -1 and -4. What are your y values? 5 and -6. So if I simplify this, guys, what's -1 plus 4? So it's 3 squared plus, what's 5 plus 6? 11 squared. So 9 plus 121 equals what? Square root of 130. Now, most of the time I tell you guys try and break that down. But why I'm going to tell you not to break it down this time? When I put it in the formula, I need r what? Squared. So if my r is the square root of 130, when I put it in the formula and I square it, what happens to the squared and the square root? So this just becomes 130. So when they give you the center and the radius, it's super easy. Just plug it in. If they give you the center and a point, you can halfway get your formula done, and then you just have to find the radius. The last one is where you have to do all of the work. They're going to give you 2 points that are on the circle. So then you have to do a little bit of arithmetic. You got to do 2 different things. So what is that, 160? What does it tell me? I have endpoints on the circle that are where? What is it? -1, positive what? 3. All right, what's the other one? 7, -5. Okay, guys, endpoints on the circle. They're just telling you that they're one's on one side, one's on the other. It doesn't matter where you draw it. But what are you creating when you go from one side to the other? The diameter. So the 2 things, remember, that you need for your circle, you need the center and you need what else? The radius. So given those 2 points, how would I find the center? The midpoint formula. So I'm going to find the midpoint because that's going to help me find the center. So I take my 2 x's and I do what? So I have -1 plus 7 divided by 2. And then I have 3, what? Plus -5 divided by 2. What's -1 plus 7? 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. What's 3 plus -5? -2 divided by 2 is -1. Okay? So my center is right here at 3, -1. 3, -1. Now that I found the center, I need to find the radius. How could I do that? Use the center and one of the points on the circle. It doesn't matter what you use. I personally would use -1, 3. Why? Because they're smaller. Anything that's positive or small, it's easier to use. So I'm going to do the distance between 3, -1, and -1, 3. And that's going to give me what value? What am I trying to find? The radius. Okay. So what are my x's? 3 and -1. What are my y's? -1 and 3. Okay. So what is 3 minus -1? 4 squared. Plus, what's -1 minus 3? Yep. So I have 16 plus 16. Square root 32. Now remember, I'm going to put it right here. It's the square root of 32. That's what I found out the radius to be. Do I have what I need in order to write my equation? Yes. So, I'll write it over here. So I'm going to set it up. Looks similar to what formula? Yep. I know I keep saying the same thing on purpose. X goes in the front, Y goes in the second one. So, fill it in. X minus what? 3 plus y what? Plus 1 equals what? 32. Could I put the square root of 32 there? I could, but then what would I have to put up in the corner? The squared. But there's your equation of your circle. That is basically, guys, what your quiz is going to be. It's not going to be 20 problems or anything like that. It's going to be very basic, very straightforward. Given these 2 points, find the distance. Given these 2 points, find the midpoint. Given these 2 points on a circle, write the equation of the circle. Nothing crazy. Not trying to trick you or anything like that. You just have to pay attention to your signs.